Surviving a corporate job in New York for 3 years without getting fired is a skill. Surviving 3 years as the personal secretary to a tech billionaire while actively hiding the fact that you are a suppressed omega that is an Olympic sport. My name is Ezra Hayes. My life goal: secure the bag, buy a dilapidated farm in Montana, and never look at another spreadsheet again. Today was supposed to be my Independence Day. I stood in the center of the 40th floor penthouse office at Sterling Technologies, Manhattan. Sunlight glared aggressively through the floor-to-ceiling windows, matching my impending headache. With a calm I did not possess, I slid a crisp white envelope across the mahogany desk. "What is this?" Julian Sterling asked. Julian, the golden boy of Silicon Valley, transplanted to the East Coast. Tall, impeccably groomed, possessing the chaotic, eager energy of a genetically enhanced golden retriever who also happened to control 30% of the global AI market. "It is a piece of paper, sir," I deadpanned. "Specifically, my 2 weeks' notice." Julian stared at the envelope. He stared at me. He stared back at the envelope like it might spontaneously combust. "Who is threatening you?" he whispered. I blinked. "Capitalism. Also my own impending burnout." "Is it the board? Did the board say something to you?" Julian stood up his chair, scraping violently against the hardwood, his alpha pheromones, usually a comforting mild blend of rain and expensive cedar, spiked with sudden irrational distress. "Ezra, I swear to God, if someone is blackmailing you—" "Sir, no one is blackmailing me. I just want to retire and raise alpacas." He grabbed the envelope. He did not just rip it, he shredded it with the precision of a man dismantling a nuclear bomb. "Your salary is now increased by 1,000%. You get 6 weeks of paid vacation. I will buy you an alpaca. I will buy you 10 alpacas and keep them in the lobby." I stared at the confetti of my freedom raining down on his desk. That is a massive zoning violation. Before Julian could offer me a petting zoo, the heavy double doors of the office did not just open, they were practically kicked off their hinges. Enter problem number 2. Vance Crawford. If Julian was a golden retriever, Vance was a Doberman trained specifically for tax evasion and corporate espionage. Sharp jaw, custom-tailored charcoal suit, and an aura that screamed, "I will ruin your life, and you will thank me for it." He was the apex predator of Wall Street, and incidentally Julian's biggest commercial rival. "Sterling." Vance drawled his voice a low, threatening purr. He strolled into the room like he owned the building, which, knowing him, was a terrifying mathematical possibility. Julian instantly stepped in front of me, shielding me from view. "Crawford, you are trespassing." Vance ignored him completely. His dark eyes locked onto me, tracking me with the intensity of a sniper. He casually tossed a thick, leather-bound folder onto the ruins of my resignation letter. "Hostile takeover," Vance announced smoothly. "I just bought out 51% of Sterling Tech's Manhattan subsidiary shares, effective immediately." Julian scoffed. "You cannot do that. What is your endgame, Vance?" Vance smirked a dangerous razor-sharp curve of his lips. He raised a finger and pointed directly at my face. "Him. He is my secretary now." Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. In my earbud, my custom AI assistant MAX chimed in with his usual robotic cheerfulness. "Alert, Ezra's stress levels are critically high. Shall I order a casket or perhaps a very strong margarita?" Mute, I thought violently. I looked at Vance. "I do not work for you." "You do now, sweetheart," Vance said. His alpha pheromones, dark roast coffee, and gunpowder flooded the room, clashing directly with Julian's. "He is my secretary." Julian snarled, his golden boy persona entirely evaporating. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me slightly further behind him. "He was your secretary," Vance countered, stepping closer. His gaze dropped to where Julian's hand wrapped around my wrist, and his eyes darkened dangerously. "Let him go, Sterling. Make me Crawford." The air pressure in the room plummeted. The pheromone clash between two apex alphas was enough to make my hidden omega instincts scream in sheer biological panic. My suppressants were working overtime just to keep my own scent, a cursed mix of cedar smoke and citrus, from leaking out and turning this corporate standoff into an R-rated disaster. I took a deep breath, and then I did the only logical thing. I ripped my arm out of Julian's grip. I picked up my cardboard box, the one I had lovingly packed this morning with my favorite mug, my stapler, and a dozen stolen company pens. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice flatter than a deflated tire, "I am emotionally allergic to both of you." Julian turned to me looking like a kicked puppy. "Ezra." Vance chuckled, stepping right into my personal space. "Fascinating. Are you always this feisty, or is it just for me?" I ignored him. I walked past both of them, heading straight for the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the bustling streets of Manhattan, 40 floors below. "MAX," I whispered under my breath. "Yes, Ezra." Calculate the survival rate of me jumping out this window and aiming for the awning of the coffee shop across the street. Survival rate is approximately 0.02%. However, it would permanently resolve your current employment crisis. Behind me, the two billionaires started viciously arguing about who had the legal right to my soul. I clutched my cardboard box tighter. I had survived this world's plot for 3 years. I just wanted a farm. I just wanted peace. But as the shouting behind me grew louder, I realized one horrible, undeniable truth. I was absolutely, completely, and utterly screwed. There is a specific kind of dread that settles in your bones when you realize your flawless escape plan has somehow morphed into a hostage situation. For me, that realization hit at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday, standing in the doorway of what used to be a reasonable executive suite. Overnight, Julian Sterling and Vance Crawford had literally bought the floor below. Us knocked down a structural wall and created a massive open-plan architectural nightmare. Julian's side was sleek, bright, and aggressively eco-friendly. Vance's side was dark leather chrome and looked like the lair of a villain who occasionally dabbled in cryptocurrency. And right in the middle, sitting perfectly on the dividing line like a geopolitical demilitarized zone, was my desk. "Good morning, Ezra." Julian beamed, looking fresh, golden, and nauseatingly well-rested. He was watering a succulent that had not been there yesterday. "Hayes." Vance acknowledged, not looking up from his tablet. He was wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exuding the dark, chaotic energy of a man who had definitely ruined an economy before breakfast. I set my cardboard box down on my new desk. I looked at Julian. I looked at Vance. "MAX," I whispered, tapping my earpiece. "Good morning, Ezra. Your heart rate is currently consistent with a gazelle realizing it has wandered into a lion sanctuary. Would you like me to play soothing ocean sounds? No, initiate Operation Severance. If they would not let me resign, I was going to make them fire me. I am a highly competent, organized, and terrifyingly efficient secretary. But starting today, I was going to be the worst employee in the history of American capitalism. My first act of corporate terrorism began at 9:30 a.m. schedule sabotage. I deliberately double-booked Julian for a meeting with a notoriously aggressive venture capitalist and a wellness guru who spoke exclusively in metaphors. I then forwarded Vance's private financial projections to the spam folder and replaced his morning brief with a printed Wikipedia article on the migratory patterns of the North American goose. I sat back at my desk, waiting for the screaming. I waited for the HR complaints. I waited for the glorious, liberating words, "You're fired." At 10:15 a.m., Julian emerged from his office looking deeply moved. "Ezra." That meeting, putting the VC and the wellness guru in the same room, genius. They bonded over their shared childhood trauma and just signed a $50 million joint initiative. You truly understand the human condition. I stared at him, my soul leaving my body. I literally just clicked random names on the calendar. Modest as always. Julian sighed affectionately, retreating into his office. Before I could recover, Vance stepped up to my desk. He slapped the Wikipedia article about geese onto my keyboard. I am so sorry, sir. I lied, keeping my face perfectly blank. A terrible clerical error. I will pack my things immediately." Vance leaned over the desk, his dark eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "A clerical error. Do not insult my intelligence, Hayes. Geese fly in a V formation to maximize aerodynamic efficiency, rotating leadership to avoid fatigue. It is a brilliant, subtle critique of my current management structure. You are telling me to delegate." He smirked. "Savage. I like it. Keep challenging me." I watched him walk away. My left eye began to twitch. I muttered. "Am I dead? Is this hell?" "Negative. You are in Manhattan. The difference is negligible." MAX replied helpfully. "Fine. If psychological warfare was not going to work, I would have to resort to biological warfare." At 2 p.m., both CEOs requested coffee. This was my moment. I walked into the executive pantry. I did not just brew espresso, I engineered a biohazard. I took the darkest, most bitter roast available. I added 2 heaping spoonfuls of pink Himalayan sea salt. To top it off, instead of vanilla syrup, I added a generous dash of aged black vinegar. The resulting liquid looked like coffee, but it smelled like a regretful night in a dive bar. I walked out balancing the 2 mugs on a silver tray. I placed the white mug in front of Julian and the black mug in front of Vance. "Your afternoon coffee, gentlemen," I announced. Julian smiled warmly. "Thank you, Ezra. You always know exactly what I need." He took a large, confident gulp. I watched, waiting for him to spit it out. I waited for the disgust. Julian's eyes watered. His face went slightly pale. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. He looked down at the mug, then up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Ezra. The complexity of this flavor profile. It is aggressive. It challenges the palate. It is a bold statement on modern corporate fatigue. It is humanistic. He took another sip. He was visibly vibrating with sodium. "Are you insane?" I blurted out. Vance scoffed at Julian. "Do not be dramatic, Sterling. It is just coffee." He picked up his mug, maintaining unbroken eye contact with me, and chugged half of it in one go. Vance's jaw clenched. The veins in his neck popped. A single solitary bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He slammed the mug back down onto the desk. "Wild," Vance rasped his voice an entire octave lower. "Unforgiving. Tastes like raw ambition." I stood there holding an empty silver tray, realizing with horrifying clarity that I was not dealing with formidable billionaires. I was dealing with brain-dead, hopelessly delusional simps. "I am going on my lunch break," I said numbly. "If either of you die, please ensure HR processes my final paycheck first." At 11:42 p.m. that night, I was lying on the couch in my Brooklyn apartment eating cold pizza when my phone screen lit up. "Alert MAX" announced through the apartment speakers. "I have intercepted emergency dispatch records. Both Julian Sterling and Vance Crawford have been admitted to the emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital." I paused mid-bite. "Car crash, severe gastrointestinal distress, and sodium poisoning." The attending physician noted it was as if they drank seawater marinated in salad dressing. A profound sense of peace washed over me. Finally, I had poisoned two of the wealthiest men in New York. The police would be here any minute, or at the very least, a courier with my termination papers. I went to sleep with a smile on my face for the first time in years. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened the door wearing my oversized sweatpants, fully prepared to be handed a lawsuit. Instead, a delivery man was standing there, entirely obscured by two gargantuan, ludicrously expensive floral arrangements. One was a towering display of white lilies. The other was a violent, massive explosion of blood-red roses. "Delivery for Ezra Hayes," the man grunted. I pulled the cards from the bouquets. The first, written in elegant calligraphy. "Ezra." The doctor said my stomach lining is inflamed, but my heart has never been fuller. "Take the day off. You have worked too hard. Yours, Julian." The second scrawled in sharp, aggressive handwriting. "Hayes, nice try. See you tomorrow. Vance." I dropped the cards on the floor. "MAX." I said, my voice completely hollow. From the ceiling speakers, MAX did not speak. Instead, my highly advanced state-of-the-art AI assistant simply played the sound effect of a crow cawing aggressively in the distance. I closed my eyes. There was no escape. They were not just immune to my incompetence, they were romantically emboldened by it. I was trapped in a romantic comedy written by a psychopath, and I was the punchline. The annual Wall Street Innovations Gala is essentially a high-budget terrarium where billionaires gather to measure their egos and pretend they care about philanthropy. For me, it was unpaid overtime. I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, wearing a rented tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, gripping a glass of sparkling water like it was a weapon. "MAXI" murmured into my earpiece, taking a sip. "Give me a status report on my blood pressure. Your blood pressure is currently 130/85, Ezra. Elevated, but not entirely lethal. Would you like me to deploy a localized EMP to shut down the DJ's audio equipment? The acoustic assault appears to be a contributing factor." Tempting, but no. We are maintaining a low profile. That was a lie. There is no low profile when you are the joint secretary to Julian Sterling and Vance Crawford. They were currently standing near the center ice sculpture, looking like a magazine cover titled "Men Who Will Ruin Your Life and Your Credit Score." Julian was in a midnight blue velvet suit, radiating golden boy charisma, charming a group of tech investors. Vance wore a three-piece suit as black as his soul, glaring at anyone who breathed too loudly near him. And yet, despite being surrounded by the elite of New York, both of them kept throwing glances at my corner every 45 seconds. I had counted. The plot of this ridiculous universe dictated that I was a fragile background beta. a stepping stone for their inevitable clash. But tonight, the universe decided to test my patience. Enter Trent Lawton. Trent was the CEO of a rival fintech firm, a man whose entire personality was built around bad crypto investments and excessive hair gel. I watched as he slithered up to Julian and Vance, flanked by two nervous-looking executives. Sterling, Crawford. Trent sneered, his voice loud enough to carry over the string quartet. A little bird told me your new joint AI trading platform is hemorrhaging capital. Something about a fatal flaw in the automated bot algorithms. Julian's polite smile did not waver, but his eyes went cold. Our algorithms are performing perfectly, Trent. I suggest you check your own portfolio before worrying about ours. Trent smirked, pulling out his phone. Is that so? Because I just tipped off the major financial networks. In about 5 minutes, an insider report is going to drop detailing a massive security breach in your crypto exchange nodes. The trending keywords are already preloaded and optimized. It is going to be a bloodbath for your stock prices. A shame, really. I might buy the dip. Julian tensed. Vance's hand slowly curled into a fist, his dark pheromones beginning to spike, threatening to turn the gala into a crime scene. I let out a long, exhausted sigh. "MAX," I said quietly. How much of a headache will it be if they get arrested for assault on public television? Calculations indicate a 94% decrease in your overall peace of mind, Ezra. You would have to manage their bail, PR crisis, and dietary requirements in holding. Unacceptable. I set my sparkling water down, I adjusted my cuffs, and I walked directly into the lion's den. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly modulated to cut through the tension. I stepped seamlessly between Vance and Trent, holding my datapad. "Mr. Lawton, it is a pleasure to finally meet the man who holds the industry record for the fastest automated liquidation on the exchange. Truly, losing $40 million in a single margin call takes a special kind of talent." Trent flushed a violent shade of magenta. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the secretary," I replied pleasantly. I tapped my earpiece. "MAX. Route call to the editorial desk at the Financial Times. Override the receptionist using the backdoor protocol I installed last month." Julian and Vance both stared at me. "Ezra, what are you doing?" Julian asked softly. "My job, sir," I said. The call connected. "Yes, this is Ezra Hayes from the Sterling Crawford Consortium. I am sending you an exclusive verified data packet regarding Trent Lawton's offshore shell companies. Yes, the ones currently using illegal subroutines to manipulate hashtag algorithms to artificially inflate his own meme coins. Feel free to publish immediately. Thank you." I hung up. I did not even look at Trent as I dialed the second number. "MAX, connect me to the primary server of Trent's trading bot matrix, the one he thinks is secure." "Connecting. Firewall breached in 1.4 seconds. They really should update their security patches, Ezra." Indeed. I looked Trent dead in the eye. He was sweating now. The hair gel was losing its structural integrity. "Mr. Lawton, my finger is currently hovering over a command that will initiate a massive automated short sell of your entire firm's public assets. Your little fake news report about our security breach, cancel it. Now." Trent's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. "You cannot do that. That is market manipulation. That is illegal. I am a secretary." I said, offering him a smile so cold it could have frozen the Atlantic. "I do not manipulate markets. I just organize schedules. And currently, your schedule says you have a bankruptcy hearing at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Unless you make a phone call, you have 10 seconds. Trent frantically grabbed his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed his PR team to kill the story. He backed away from us, pale and terrified, before turning and fleeing the ballroom entirely. I let out a breath, tapping my datapad to clear the screens. "Problem solved. Sirs, I highly recommend we upgrade our own server firewalls by Monday. The current landscape is entirely too vulnerable to brute force keyword analytics." I turned around to find both Julian and Vance staring at me. Not with anger, not with shock. They were staring at me like I was a deity that had just descended from the heavens. Julian's mouth was slightly parted. Vance's dark eyes were blown wide, completely consumed by an intense, ravenous fire. The fragile, helpless beta illusion I had maintained for 3 years shattered into a million irreversible pieces on that marble floor. "You." Vance stepped closer, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "You just dismantled a CEO with 3 phone calls and did not even blink." "I am highly efficient, sir," I said, taking a step back. "You are a menace," Julian breathed out, stepping forward to close the gap I had just created. His golden retriever energy was gone, replaced by the sharp, focused gaze of a predator who had finally realized what he was hunting. A beautiful, terrifying menace. "I am clocking out," I announced, turning on my heel and power walking toward the terrace doors. I pushed through the glass, stepping out onto the expansive balcony. The cold New York night wind hit me instantly, biting through my thin, rented tuxedo. I shivered, walking over to the stone balustrade and gripping the edge. "MAX, I thought, my chest feeling strangely tight. Report. Ezra, your heart rate is currently 110 beats per minute. Your adrenaline levels are spiking. Also, I must inform you that you are being followed." Before I could even turn around, a heavy, warm velvet jacket was draped over my shoulders. The scent of rain and cedar enveloped me instantly. Julian stood beside me, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You should not be out here without a coat," Julian said softly, looking out at the glittering city skyline. "You will catch a cold." I was overheating, I muttered, pulling the velvet tighter around myself, despite my brain screaming at me to throw it back. From the other side, the terrace doors clicked shut. Vance walked out. He did not say a word. He just moved to my other side. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a pompous-looking executive from the ballroom press his face against the glass, glaring at me with blatant, ugly jealousy. Vance did not even break his stride. He casually picked up a heavy crystal whiskey glass from a nearby tray and crushed it in his bare hand. The glass shattered with a loud crack, the shards falling to the floor. Vance stared directly at the executive through the window, his eyes dead and soulless. The man went pale and practically sprinted away. Vance casually wiped a drop of whiskey from his thumb and leaned against the stone railing next to me. "Mine," Vance murmured so quietly I almost did not hear it. Julian did not argue. For once, the two of them were not fighting. They were just standing on either side of me, forming a solid, impenetrable wall against the rest of the world. My chest tightened again. It was not just panic this time. It was something warmer, something incredibly dangerous. I had spent 3 years avoiding the plot, but standing here, sandwiched between the two most powerful men in the city, I realized the plot had already caught me. Alert time, AX's voice suddenly chimed in my ear, devoid of his usual sarcasm. "Ezra, I am detecting a critical biochemical shift in your bloodstream." My breath hitched. I suddenly felt dizzy. The cool night air felt entirely too hot. A deep, heavy ache settled at the base of my spine, and my skin flushed with sudden, intense heat. What I thought frantically, "MAX, what is happening? Your pharmaceutical suppressants have failed due to acute psychological stress and prolonged proximity to high-level alpha pheromones. Your biological profile is currently reclassifying." "Oh God, no, not here, not now." Julian frowned, leaning in slightly. He took a deep breath, his golden eyes widening in confusion. "Ezra, what is that scent?" Vance froze. The dark, cynical amusement vanished from his face, replaced by raw, primal shock. He inhaled sharply, his gaze snapping to the side of my neck. The smell of cedar smoke and sharp citrus began to flood the terrace, sweet and heavy and utterly undeniable. My omega heat had just started. If I were to rank the top 10 worst things to happen in a corporate environment, a surprise audit would usually take the #1 spot. However, as of 2:14 p.m. this afternoon, a financial audit had been violently demoted to #2. #1 was my own biology deciding to stage a hostile takeover. It started as a mild annoyance right after lunch, a strange persistent flush at the back of my neck. I blamed it on the excessive ambient tension radiating from Julian and Vance, who were currently sitting in the open-plan office, engaged in a silent, high-stakes, glaring contest over who got to approve my vacation request. Then the elevator doors chimed and a squad of men and women in impeccably boring gray suits marched onto our executive floor. They carried clipboards, wore severe expressions, and radiated the distinct bureaucratic, joyless energy of people who thrived on ruining lives. The Omega Management Commission. Alert Sayer MAX chimed quietly in my earbud, sounding entirely too thrilled for a synthetic intelligence. The OMC inspectors have arrived for an unannounced compliance sweep. They are currently scanning the lobby for unregistered secondary gender signatures. I froze. My fingers hovered over my keyboard. I had avoided the OMC for 3 years by aggressively hacking the municipal registry and forging a flawless beta medical file. I was a ghost in their system, but today, the universe, or the deranged author of my life's plot, decided my free trial of peace had expired. Suddenly my lungs seized. It was not a panic attack. It was a physical, biological detonation. A wave of heat so intense it felt like someone had injected liquid magma directly into my spine. My knees buckled beneath the desk, and a sharp, ragged gasp ripped from my throat. MAX, I thought frantically, gripping the edge of the mahogany desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Tell me the building's HVAC system is malfunctioning. Negative Ezra. The HVAC is operating at optimal efficiency, MAX replied. However, your core temperature has spiked to 101.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Your pharmaceutical suppressants have completely failed. Congratulations, you are experiencing a spontaneous heat cycle in the middle of a high-density corporate time zone. Shall I play a celebratory air horn? Mute. I stumbled out of my ergonomic chair, my vision swimming with dark spots. The sweet, heavy scent of cedar smoke and sharp, panicked citrus burst from my scent glands, completely bypassing any conscious control. It was thick. It was suffocating. It was a neon sign flashing unregistered Omega in distress. Mr. Hayes, one of the gray-suited inspectors, called out from across the room, her nose twitching. Sir, please halt. We need to run a localized pheromone scan. I did not halt. I ran. I bolted down the hallway, my legs feeling like they were made of damp cotton. Every breath I took felt like inhaling fire. I bypassed Julian's glass office. I bypassed Vance's brooding leather cavern. I headed straight for the only place on this floor that was entirely secure, the physical archives vault. It was a reinforced, sound-dampened steel room where Vance kept his most legally ambiguous corporate contracts. I shoved the heavy steel door open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. I slapped the emergency lockdown button, engaged the deadbolt, and manually scrambled the electronic keypad. I slid down the cold metal door until I hit the floor, curling my knees to my chest. I was shivering violently despite the fever cooking my blood. The air in the tiny vault quickly grew thick, with my own pheromones, a suffocating, intoxicating haze of cedar and citrus. Ezra, your heart rate is critical, MAX noted calmly. Would you like me to order chamomile tea, or perhaps alert the authorities that you are currently trapped in a sensory deprivation panic room? Shut up, I whimpered out loud, burying my face in my hands. Outside, the heavy door chaos erupted. Even through the sound-dampened steel, I could hear the commotion. I heard the sharp, authoritative bark of the OMC inspectors demanding access to the vault. I heard the confused murmurs of our executive staff. And then I heard them. It was like a bomb went off on the 40th floor. The air pressure outside the vault must have plummeted, because even sealed inside, I could feel the sheer oppressive weight of two furious apex alphas descending upon the hallway. Step away from the door, Julian snarled. Gone was the polite, eco-friendly golden retriever tech mogul. His voice was a guttural, terrifying command that made the metal door vibrate against my spine. The scent of rain and mountain air bled through the seams of the door, heavy with pure, unadulterated protective aggression. By the authority of the OMC, we have detected a highly irregular Omega signature. The lead inspector started trying to maintain her bureaucratic high ground. I do not care if you have the authority of God himself. Vance's voice cut through the air like a serrated blade. His pheromones, dark roast coffee, and gunpowder crashed into Julian's, but miraculously, they did not fight each other. They merged. They formed a suffocating, lethal barricade right outside my door. If you take one more step toward that room, I will buy the bank that holds your mortgage. I will buy the company that employs your spouse. I will personally ensure your entire bloodline is erased from the American financial system by dinner time. There was a collective gasp from the staff. Vance Crawford did not make empty threats. He made business plans. Mr. Crawford, Mr. Sterling, you are harboring an unregistered Omega. This is a federal violation. The inspector squeaked, her voice losing all its prior confidence. Hey, he is not a violation. He is our employee. Julian snapped his tone, freezing the very air. And as of right now, this entire floor is private property under lockdown for a corporate security breach. You have exactly 30 seconds to get into the elevator before my legal team hits you with a restraining order so severe you will not be able to step foot in Manhattan. 20 seconds, Vance corrected coldly. Because if you are still here at 0, I stop using lawyers and start using private security, and my security contractors do not ask for ID. The sheer audacity of it, the absolute unhinged madness. Two of the wealthiest men in the country were casually committing federal obstruction of justice in front of dozens of witnesses, risking their entire empires just to guard a steel door. I heard the frantic clicking of sensible heels retreating. I heard the elevator chime. I heard the terrified whispers of the employees being ordered to clear the floor. Then there was silence. I sat on the floor, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps, sweat dripping down my temples. The heat cycle was tearing through my system, making me ache with a hollow, desperate emptiness. I hugged my knees tighter, trying to ground myself against the cold steel. A heavy knock sounded right behind my head. Ezra. Julian's voice was muffled through the metal, but the raw, unfiltered panic in it was crystal clear. It was not the voice of a CEO. It was the voice of a man terrified he was going to lose something irreplaceable. Ezra, please, talk to me. Are you okay? Hayes. Vance's voice came next, lower pressed right against the crack of the door. He was not demanding. He was pleading. Sweetheart, let us in. We will not touch you. I swear on my life we will not lay a finger on you if you do not want us to. Just let us get you to a doctor, please. I closed my eyes. The tears I had been holding back finally slipped free, tracking hot paths down my flushed cheeks. For 3 years, I had convinced myself that I was avoiding the plot. I thought I was running from a cliché narrative, running from the forced romance, running from being reduced to a helpless Omega waiting to be saved. I thought I hated them. But as I sat there listening to the two most powerful, ruthless men in New York City beg through a steel door, abandoning all their pride and logic just to make sure I was breathing the truth, hit me harder than the heat cycle itself. I was not afraid of being exposed as an Omega. I was terrified because as my hand trembled and slowly reached up toward the electronic deadbolt, I realized how desperately I wanted to open the door and let them in. Taking a week of sick leave was supposed to be a strategic retreat after the Omega Management Commission fiasco and the subsequent emergency medical intervention which involved Julian and Vance threatening a private clinic's entire board of directors to keep my biology off the grid. I fully expected to be left alone in my Brooklyn penthouse to recover my dignity. I was a fool. A naive, optimistic fool. I woke up on a Tuesday morning, not to the peaceful sound of Brooklyn traffic, but to the distinct, horrifying noise of a blender violently crushing ice, followed by a string of aggressive curses. I sat up, my oversized gray sweater slipping off one shoulder. The lingering exhaustion of my heat cycle still clung to my bones, but the sheer panic of an impending home invasion overrode it. MAX, I croaked my throat dry. Did someone break in? Call 911. Good morning, Ezra. MAX chirped pleasantly from the ceiling. There is no need for law enforcement. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Crawford utilized their administrative overrides to bypass your smart locks at exactly 6 a.m. They claimed they were here to protect key personnel. I tried to deploy the automated pepper spray defense system, but Mr. Crawford threatened to dismantle my mainframe with a titanium wrench. I buried my face in my hands. I hate my life. I dragged myself out of bed, slipped into a pair of fuzzy slippers, and shuffled down the hallway. My penthouse was usually a sanctuary of minimalist calm. Today it looked like the staging ground for a culinary war. In the open-plan kitchen, Julian Sterling was wearing an apron over his designer dress shirt. He was standing over the stove holding a digital laser thermometer, meticulously taking the temperature of a pot of chicken congee. The optimal gelatinization of rice starches occurs at exactly 68 degrees Celsius Crawford. Julian was explaining, adjusting his glasses with the intense focus of a man trying to split an atom. If you boil it too fast, it loses its medicinal texture. Ezra's throat is likely inflamed. He needs easily digestible sustenance. Standing on the opposite side of the kitchen island was Vance Crawford, looking like a mafia boss who had been forced to attend a bake sale. He was leaning against the marble counter, arms crossed, glaring at Julian's pot, like it had personally offended him. Sterling, your porridge looks like industrial wall sealant, Vance sneered. He casually tapped his phone, which is why I had my team hire Chef Laurent from Le Bernardin. He is currently parked in a custom-built mobile kitchen outside the building. We have a selection of white truffle risotto line, caught Chilean sea bass, and a Wagyu beef broth that has been simmering since yesterday. He just had a heat cycle, Vance. He does not need Wagyu. He needs electrolytes and gentle carbohydrates. Julian yelled, waving the laser thermometer. He needs premium protein to rebuild his strength, you eco-friendly psychopath. Vance yelled back, his dark pheromones flaring up to clash with Julian's defensive cedar scent. Suddenly, the heavy, dramatic chords of Mozart's Requiem began blaring from my apartment's surround sound speakers. I stared up at the ceiling. "MAX, what are you doing?" Setting the appropriate mood for the impending homicide, Ezra, the AI, replied smoothly. "Statistically, one of them is about to use a kitchen knife." "Turn it off," I sighed. The music cut out. Julian and Vance both snapped their heads toward me. Instantly, the hostility vanished. The deadly corporate titans evaporated, replaced by two massive, overbearing, entirely too handsome men looking at me like I was made of spun glass. "Ezra." Julian breathed immediately, abandoning his precision-engineered kanji to rush over. "You should not be out of bed. Is it cold? Are you cold?" Before I could answer, Vance was there, practically shoving Julian aside to drape a thick, impossibly soft cashmere throw over my shoulders. "You look pale." Vance frowned, his hand lingering on the nape of my neck, his thumb brushing a pulse point. His voice dropped an octave rough and impossibly gentle. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I stared blankly at Vance's hand, then at Julian's worried golden retriever eyes. "I am feeling," I started, my voice perfectly deadpan, "like I am trapped in a surrealist nightmare. Why are you in my house? Why is there a Michelin-starred chef in my driveway? And why, for the love of God, is Julian trying to chemically synthesize porridge?" "We are taking care of you," Julian said earnestly. "You are terrorizing me," I corrected. I tightened the cashmere throw around myself. "I am going to my home office. I do not want to be disturbed unless the building is actively on fire. And if it is, please evacuate yourselves and leave me to perish." I turned and marched back down the hall, locking my office door behind me. I slumped into my desk chair, letting out a long breath. My heart was pounding, and it had absolutely nothing to do with residual heat symptoms. It was the way Vance had touched my neck. It was the way Julian looked at me. It was terrifying. I needed to know why. Why were two billionaires so obsessed with a secretary who actively tried to poison them? I powered on my desktop. I had 3 years of clearance backdoor access to their servers and a lot of free time. MAX. Initiate a deep dive into Julian's encrypted personal servers. Cross-reference my name, employee ID, and medical records. Processing. MAX hummed. Decrypting. Access granted. Ezra, I have found a hidden subdirectory created 14 months ago. A file popped up on my screen. I clicked it open and my breath caught in my throat. It was my original OMC medical file, the one detailing my Omega status, the one I thought I had perfectly erased, but there were notes attached to it, Julian's handwriting digitized. System flagged Hayes' forged beta status. OMC sweep impending. Override registry. Encrypt file to personal server. Do not let OMC access. Protect at all costs. Julian had known. For over a year, Julian knew I was an Omega. He did not fire me. He did not expose me. He actively risked federal charges to build an encrypted firewall around my identity, just so I could live in peace. My chest tightened painfully. MAX. I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Check Vance's files. Look for anything related to the Sterling Tech acquisition or my name. Searching, MAX replied. I have located a private security dossier from exactly 3 years and 2 months ago. It coincides with the week Mr. Crawford initiated the hostile takeover. The file opened. It was a security report detailing an assassination attempt on Vance Crawford in a dark alley in Lower Manhattan. The report stated that Vance had been bleeding out, cornered by corporate mercenaries. Then I saw the attached security camera footage. It was grainy but clear enough. A younger, skinnier version of me walking home with a bag of groceries. I stumbled across a bleeding Vance. The footage showed me panic grab Vance by the collar and unceremoniously shove him into a massive industrial dumpster. I then threw 3 heavy bags of rotting garbage directly onto his head before calmly turning around and misdirecting the armed mercenaries down the opposite street. I stared at the screen. Oh my God. I had completely forgotten about that. I thought he was just a random drunk mugging victim. I literally threw the apex predator of Wall Street into a dumpster to save his life. Vance did not buy Julian's company to crush his rival. He bought the company because he spent months tracking down the nameless beta who saved him, only to find out I was working for his worst enemy. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the office deafening. I had spent years calling them delusional. I had spent years thinking this was just an absurd comedic plot where 2 rich idiots were blindly chasing a random secretary for no reason. But it was not random. Julian had been silently guarding my freedom. Vance had been hunting down his savior. I stood up slowly, walked back to the office door, and unlocked it. I walked quietly down the hallway and stopped at the edge of the living room. The kitchen was still a disaster. Julian was currently scolding Vance about the ecological impact of importing truffles, while Vance was threatening to buy Julian's favorite eco-resort and turn it into a parking lot. They were standing over the sink, two billionaires in expensive clothes, viciously fighting over who got to wash my favorite coffee mug. I leaned against the doorframe watching them. My heart did that terrifying, uncontrollable thing again. It did not just beat, it surrendered. MAX. I whispered into the quiet hallway, a small, helpless smile finally breaking across my face. Yes, Ezra. Cancel the escape plans. I think I am keeping them. There is a saying in public relations. There is no such thing as bad publicity. Whoever coined that phrase had clearly never woken up to find their face plastered across the digital billboards of Times Square with the headline, "The Billion-Dollar Omega," how one secretary manipulated the stock market, and two CEOs. I stared at the massive flat-screen TV in my living room, my coffee cup suspended halfway to my mouth. "Good morning, Ezra," MAX chimed cheerfully through the penthouse speakers. It is 6 a.m. on a Thursday. The weather is a brisk 55 degrees, and you are currently trending at #1 on all major social media platforms. Would you like me to read the top comments? Spoiler alert, a concerning number of people are asking for your skincare routine. Mute, I croaked. The news anchor on the screen was breathlessly detailing an anonymous leak from a rival tech firm, obviously Trent Lawton's last desperate act of revenge before his bankruptcy hearing. The leak exposed everything: the Omega Management Commission's raid, the lockdown of the 40th floor, and the fact that Julian Sterling and Vance Crawford, two of the most powerful men in America, were allegedly engaged in a shadow war over a supposedly helpless Omega secretary. The narrative was infuriatingly predictable. I was being painted as the classic tragic damsel, a fragile little Omega who used his pheromones to bewitch two innocent, upstanding billionaires into committing corporate espionage. Before I could even set my coffee down, the front door of my penthouse burst open. Julian and Vance stormed in, radiating enough lethal alpha energy to power a small European country. Julian was not wearing his usual polite smile. He looked like an avenging angel, his golden eyes dark and furious. Vance looked worse. He looked like he was already calculating the logistics of hiding bodies in the Hudson River. "We are shutting down the internet," Julian announced. It was not a joke. He was entirely serious. "I have my engineers writing a localized malware worm to scrub your name from every server on the East Coast." "That is too slow," Vance snarled, pacing across my rug. "I am buying the news networks, all of them. Then I am going to find Lawton, buy the building he lives in, and legally evict him into the Atlantic Ocean." They were completely spiraling. The Omega Management Commission had officially filed an injunction to strip me of my working rights, claiming my presence in a high-level corporate environment was a biological hazard and a conflict of interest. My two billionaires were ready to burn the world down to protect me. It was touching. It was romantic. It was also entirely unnecessary. "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through their homicidal brainstorming. They both froze, looking at me. I was wearing silk pajamas and holding a mug that said, "World's Okayest Employee," but I felt a sudden icy calm settle over my bones. For 3 years, I had hidden. I had forged documents, suppressed my biology, and played the background character because I thought the plot was stronger than I was. But looking at the two titans standing in my living room, ready to destroy their own empires for me, I realized something. I was not the background character anymore. I was the one holding their leashes. "You are not shutting down the internet. You are not buying the news networks," I said calmly, setting my mug down. "You are going to go back to your respective penthouses, put on your most expensive, intimidating suits, and meet me at the Sterling Crawford press room at noon." Julian blinked, his anger flickering into deep concern. "Ezra, you cannot face the press right now. The OMC is waiting outside the building. They want to make a public spectacle out of you. Let us handle this." "No." I replied, my tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. "They want a spectacle, I will give them a spectacle." MAX. "Yeah, Ezra. Execute protocol checkmate. Liquidate my offshore crypto portfolios, the ones Trent Lawton thought were his." Executing. Liquid assets currently totaling $4.2 billion have been transferred to your primary account. Vance's jaw actually dropped. Julian stared at me like I had just grown wings. "Ezra, what offshore portfolios?" "The ones I built while you two were busy arguing over who got to pay for my lunch." I smiled a sharp, cold expression that made Vance shiver visibly. "Now get out of my house. I have a suit to tailor." At 11:55 a.m., the Sterling Crawford press room was a war zone. Hundreds of reporters, camera crews, and flashing lights filled the space. In the front row sat the regional directors of the Omega Management Commission, looking incredibly smug, holding thick binders of regulations they were fully prepared to throw at me. At 12 p.m. sharp, the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the room opened. The room went dead silent. I did not walk in looking like a victim. I wore a custom-tailored midnight black suit that fit like a second skin. My hair was styled, my posture was flawless, and I was not wearing a single drop of scent blocker. The faint, confident scent of cedar smoke and citrus rolled through the room, not in panic, but in absolute unapologetic dominance. Flanking me, one step behind on either side, were Julian Sterling and Vance Crawford. They looked like my personal attack dogs. They did not look at the press, they only looked at me. I stepped up to the podium. The microphone screeched slightly before I tapped them. "Good afternoon," I said smoothly. My voice echoed through the massive room. "I understand there has been some confusion regarding my employment status, my secondary gender, and the structural integrity of the Sterling Crawford Consortium." The lead director of the OMC stood up abruptly, pointing a pen at me. "Mr. Hayes, under Section 4B of the Federal Omega Labor Act, you are hereby ordered to step down. Your manipulative use of biological influence over these two CEOs is a federal offense. We are revoking your corporate clearance." The cameras flashed wildly. Julian's hands clenched into fists by his sides. Vance let out a low, terrifying growl. I simply raised my hand, silencing both of them without even looking back. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a sleek, matte black titanium card. I tapped it once against the wooden podium. "Section 4B of the Federal Omega Labor Act," I recited perfectly, staring dead into the OMC director's eyes, "is a municipal guideline enforced by the private lobbying firm Vanguard Holdings. Vanguard Holdings owns the lease to your headquarters funds, your pension programs, and underwrites your regulatory authority." The director frowned, looking suddenly unsure. "Yes, but what does that—" As of 11:45 a.m. this morning, I interrupted, my voice dropping to a lethal velvet whisper. "I purchased 51% of Vanguard Holdings. I own your lease. I fund your pensions. I underwrite your authority." A collective gasp echoed through the press room. The silence that followed was so profound you could hear a pin drop. I leaned closer to the microphone. "You do not revoke my clearance, Director. I revoke yours. You are fired. Please vacate my building before my security team physically removes you." The director collapsed back into his chair, pale and trembling. The cameras went completely berserk. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I turned my gaze to the sea of reporters. Let the record show I am not a victim. I am not a corporate liability. And I certainly do not need anyone's money. The market manipulation you are seeing is not magic. And it is not pheromones. It is simply the fact that I am better at my job than you are. Behind me, I heard Vance let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a whimpering sigh of pure adoration. Julian was staring at the back of my head like I was the center of the universe. And then the script flipped entirely. Without warning, Julian stepped forward. He did not take the podium. He stood beside me, ignoring the reporters completely. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "I, Julian Sterling, am of sound mind," Julian announced loudly, his voice echoing over the frantic clicking of cameras. "And I hereby publicly transfer all voting rights, personal assets, and executive control of Sterling Technologies to Ezra Hayes. I am his to command." Before the reporters could even process the billionaire voluntarily giving up his empire, Vance stepped up to my other side. He did not bring documents. He brought a digital hardware wallet containing the master keys to his entire financial network. Vance Crawford, CEO of Hale Dynamics. Vance said, his dark eyes locked onto mine, completely unbothered by the hundreds of people watching. My wealth, my shares, my company, and my life belong to him. He does not manipulate us. He rules us. The press room erupted into sheer, unadulterated chaos. People were screaming questions. Flashbulbs were blinding. History was literally being rewritten on live television. Two of the most terrifying alphas in the world had just bent the knee to an Omega secretary, and they looked ecstatic doing it. I looked at Julian. I looked at Vance. They both looked back at me, waiting for my reaction, looking like two oversized puppies waiting for a treat after destroying the living room furniture. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. I leaned into the microphone one last time to deliver the final blow to the American public. If you two are done being dramatic, I said, my voice deadpan but laced with a tiny, undeniable sliver of affection. And if you have truly handed over all your assets to me, then you are officially unemployed. Which means tonight, when we go home, you two are scrubbing the toilets. I turned off the microphone, turned on my heel, and walked out of the room. I did not have to look behind me to know they were following right on my heels exactly where they belonged. 1 year later, if you had told me a year ago that my meticulously crafted plan to retire on a dilapidated alpaca farm in Montana would end with me becoming the chairman of the board for the largest tech finance conglomerate in the Western Hemisphere, I would have politely handed you a brochure for a psychiatric facility. But life, much like the two men currently occupying my office, refuses to respect my boundaries. I sat behind a desk carved from a single slab of sustainably sourced, obscenely expensive black walnut, situated on the newly renovated 100th floor of the Sterling Crawford Tower. I was wearing a bespoke slate gray suit, sipping a perfectly iced oat milk latte, and actively trying not to look at my employees. "Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the central air conditioning. "If you read me one more statistic regarding the third quarter server yields for the European division, I am going to legally dissolve your stock options." Julian Sterling, former tech golden boy and current chief operating officer of my company, looked up from his holographic tablet. He pushed his designer glasses up the bridge of his nose, looking entirely too handsome and remarkably unfazed by my threat. "But Ezra," Julian said, his tone incredibly earnest, "the server yields represent a 12% increase in our automated efficiency. I just thought you would be proud of me. I am a Chairman Julian, not your preschool teacher. I do not give out gold stars for doing your job." From the sprawling custom-made leather sofa across the room, a deep, highly irritating chuckle rumbled through the air. Vance Crawford, former apex predator of Wall Street and my current chief financial officer, was lying flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. He was wearing a dark shirt, unbuttoned halfway down his chest, projecting the aura of a man who had completely given up on professional decorum. "Leave him alone, Sterling," Vance drawled lazily. "Cannot you see our chairman is stressed? You are boring him to death with your eco-friendly spreadsheets." Vance rolled his head to look at me, a lazy predatory smirk playing on his lips. "Sweetheart, it is 2:15 p.m. You have been looking at that monitor for 3 hours. Come here and let me kiss you." I took a slow, agonizing sip of my iced latte. "Vance, if you do not sit up and finish the quarterly risk assessment report by 3 o'clock, I am cutting your department's budget in half and donating it to a charity that saves the North American goose." Vance groaned dramatically, throwing an arm over his eyes. "You are a tyrant. I gave you my entire empire and you will not even give me a kiss. This is a hostage situation. You literally bought the building we are sitting in." I deadpanned. Alert MAX chimed in from the ceiling speakers. The AI had recently been upgraded to a state-of-the-art mainframe, which unfortunately only made his sarcasm process faster. Incoming video transmission from Harper Monroe and Sloane Kensington. Shall I patch them through to the main projector, or would you prefer to suffer in high definition? Patch them through, MAX. The massive glass wall to my left flickered, turning into a digital screen. Harper's bright, chaotic face appeared instantly. She was wearing a neon pink faux fur coat, holding a massive iced coffee, and walking down a busy Manhattan street. Next to her on the split screen was Sloane, sitting in her impeccably sterile CEO office, looking like she wanted to fire the sun for shining too brightly. "Ezra," Harper shrieked, "tell your idiot husbands to stop trying to buy the venue for my wedding. Sloane and I already booked the botanical gardens." Sloane sighed, rubbing her temples. "Ezra, please control your men." Vance tried to aggressively acquire the catering company this morning, just so he could mandate the menu. "If he tries to serve my guests Wagyu beef infused with gold leaf, I am going to poison him." I glared at the sofa. "Vance, it was a hostile takeover of a bakery. It is not a big deal." Vance muttered, not moving his arm from his eyes. "And Julian." Sloane continued her glare, freezing the camera lens. "Stop sending me spreadsheets on the carbon footprint of imported orchids. I am marrying your husband's best friend. I am not attending a climate summit." Julian looked mildly offended. I was merely suggesting sustainable alternatives, Sloan. Have you considered locally sourced moss? Harper cackled loudly. I love this for us. Anyway, gotta go. I am about to go try on dresses and financially ruin Sloan. Bye, demons. The screen blinked off. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, feeling a phantom headache forming. 3 years ago, my biggest concern was avoiding the plot of a ridiculous romance novel. Now my daily routine consisted of managing a multi-billion-dollar monopoly, preventing my husbands from committing financial terrorism in the name of wedding planning, and trying to keep my own sanity intact. I picked up my pen, a ridiculous diamond-encrusted monstrosity that Vance had gifted me for our 1-year anniversary of me not firing him. I twirled it between my fingers, looking out at the sprawling, glittering skyline of New York City. I did not run away. I did not hide on a farm. Instead, I took the narrative, ripped it out of the author's hands, and rewrote the entire damn thing. I was not the helpless Omega waiting to be saved. I was the king of the board. Suddenly, the diamond pen slipped from my fingers. It hit the mahogany desk and bounced clattering onto the plush carpet below. Before I could even lean forward, both Julian and Vance moved. It was like watching a wildlife documentary on fast forward. Julian vaulted over his chair. Vance launched himself off the sofa. Two of the wealthiest, most powerful alphas in the country dove for the floor at the exact same time, entirely driven by their desperate, deeply pathetic need to be the one to hand me my pen. A loud crack echoed beneath the desk as their heads collided with a sickening hollow thud. Vance hissed in pain, clutching his forehead. Sterling, you oversized golden retriever, watch where you are going. I was closer. You lunged like a feral animal. Julian shot back, rubbing his own temple. It is my pen. I bought it for him. I am his chief operating officer. It falls under my logistical jurisdiction. I stared down at them. 2 billionaires sitting on the floor in their bespoke suits, glaring at each other over a sparkly writing utensil. I leaned back in my leather chair. A slow, entirely genuine smile spread across my face. It was chaotic. It was exhausting. It was completely, utterly unhinged. But looking at them, I realized I would not trade it for all the alpacas in Montana. M-A-X, I said softly, resting my chin on my hand. Use Chairman Hayes. Initiate the Roomba, the one with the flamethrower modifications. I smiled down at my 2 idiot husbands. It is time to take out the trash.